Stop share for a second. Oh, it is recording. Okay, so we are recording. Not we won't record coffee hour, but we'll record this so that we can put it on our blog for people who will just be so anxious to watch. Um, so we are looking at women. We're three sessions this week, next week, and the following. And we're looking at three women out of five that are listed in Matthew's genealogy. In the Jewish tradition, for the Messiah is supposed to come from the Davidic line, so from David. And in Matthew, if you go to Matthew chapter 1, it's what we jokingly call the Jerusalem phone book. It's one of those things, and we're starting off sort of right away with Tamar, because it's the first four verses are an account of the genealogy of Jesus, the Messiah, the son of David, the son of Abraham. Abraham was the father of Isaac, Isaac the father of Jacob, and Jacob the father of Judah and his brothers, and Judah the father of Perez and Zariah by Tamar. And then it goes on and on and on, and it later lists Rahab, who we'll look at next week, the wife of Uriah, which is Bathsheba. Who else? And of course, Mary, his mother. I feel like I'm missing one. But so it's very unusual that those women were named. So that's why we're taking a look at them. Most stories about women are tucked into the larger stories of men, and they're always known in relationship to a man. Women tend to be cast as all good or all bad. And they have very little actual voice in scripture. Tamar and Rahab and Mary, of course, have quite a bit of voice. The Bible rarely asks why women act the way they do, and I think that that's in part because not many people cared. But they sort of projected primarily Jewish law onto what their actions may have been. Jesus, however, ignored that entirely, with his relationship with his mother and with Mary Magdalene, and there were many others later on with Paul that were early disciples. And the first Christian evangelists were actually women. Mm-hmm. So today we're looking at Tamar, and let me summarize. I'm not going to read the whole thing because that's it's long. But here's the basic story of Tamar. So Judah met and fell in love with a non-named daughter of a Canaanite woman named Shua. And she bore him his first son, who was named Er, E-R. And then she bore him a son, Onan. Now that might be a name you recognize. And then finally she bore him a son named Shelah. So Judah went and found a wife for his oldest son, Er, and that is Tamar. But Er was, quote unquote, wicked in the sight of the Lord, and so he got smited. He's gone. Then, and I'll explain this later, then Onan is sent to Tamar. And there's a Levitic law about this, and having to do with producing progeny for his own brother. It's a little strange. But So Onan goes to Tamar, but doesn't want to do his correct duty. And as it says, he spills his seed um, rather than try and impregnate her, which is an abomination in the sight of the Lord, and he gets smited. So you got Judah, who has two older sons who, you know, have both been with Tamar, and they're both dead. So technically, Shelah, the third son, should go in and, you know, be with Tamar, but he's a little young. So Judah says to Tamar, go off and remain a widow in your father's house until Shelah grows up. So she does. Time passes, and Judah ends up going to, because his wife dies, going um, to see his sheep shearers. And she gets word of this, and she learns that Shelah is of age, and he has not been sent to her. So, being a woman, being a widow, having absolutely no power, she decides, I am, you know, I've got to do something. So she dresses herself up as a prostitute, and woos Judah on his way home. Um, and you know, before she goes in with him, she says to him, well, how are you going to pay me? And he's like, well, I'll send you a kid, not a child, but a baby goat, a kid.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I was thinking,
clear,
wait a minute here. Okay.
A baby goat. When I get home. And she's not stupid. So she says, well, okay, if you give a pledge, then I'll accept that. And he says, well, what pledge should I give? And she says, I want your signet ring, your cord, and the staff that's in your hand.
Ooh.
So he gives them to her. They have fun. She conceives by him. He gets home, you know, picks out a kid and sends him with his friend to go pay her. But he can't find her. This friend can't find her. And he comes back to Judah and says, you know, I can't find this person. So, you know, and I checked with the townspeople and they said, there's no prostitute who hangs out here. So, you know, and so Judah kind of like blithely says, well, let her keep the things as her own. Otherwise, we'll be laughed at. This is important. Otherwise, we'll be laughed at. And sort of he puts it out of his mind for 3 months. 3 months later, he gets word that Tamar has, quote unquote, played the whore, and is, moreover, she's pregnant as a result of her whoredom. Well, when a woman gets married, she, even though she's staying at her father's house, she's not her father's property or business anymore. Technically, she is Judah's problem and property. Well, by Levitic law, he calls her to him and says, you know, let her be burned. Ooh. Because you know, she's clearly committed adultery. So she comes to Judah and she said, okay, hang on a second, take note, whose are these? The signet, the cord, and the staff. Well, when Judah sees these, he knows that they're his. So if he were to, as is the custom, find the adultering man, that person is also supposed to be killed. So he's kind of left in a bind. And he decides, and because he's the head of the house, he can do this. He decides, well, I'm wrong. We won't burn you. And he acknowledges, which is really kind of cool, she is more in the right than I, since I did not give her to my son Salah. So mind you, now she is pregnant by Judah now, and she ends up having twins, which is an unusual and sort of prophetic thing. She has Perez and Sarah, and they're listed in the genealogy. Um, so here's one artist's depiction of uh, Tamar, the harlot at the side of the road. Um, and then here's another one where you can actually see, you can see if you can find my clicker, you can see there's the staff. He's holding the ring, and there's the cord. So the cord is actually think of it as a necklace kind of thing that keeps the signet around his neck. They didn't wear the signet; they wore it around their neck. And the staff is, of course, is sort of shepherd's staff. So those are really specific items to a person. In fact, it is their identity. So in some ways, you got to question him because he decides, like as his pledge, here, I'll give you my identity. Here's my passport. So not the brightest. But then here's a look at, there's all those names, here's a look at the lineage. So Abraham has Isaac, Isaac has Jacob. There's Jacob, right? Jacob ends up with Leah and Rachel, who are sisters, and then Zilpah and Bilhah are actually the servants of Rachel and Leah. So these are all these are the part of the 12 tribes of Israel. And so here's Judah, the son of Jacob, who marries the unnamed woman, the daughter of Shua, which is, I think she's named because she's a Canaanite, not an Israelite. And from their joining, they have the oldest son, Onan, the second son, and Salah, the third son. So Tamar marries he dies. Tamar marries Onan. Well, not marries. Onan goes into him. He dies, and she's supposed to get Shelah, but she ends up with Judah, and so that's a sort of visual picture of all the players. Okay. So a little bit more about widows. Widows were a huge social and societal concern, mainly because women have no power except through their husband or children, because they do not inherit their husband's property. So they're very susceptible to and vulnerable to abuse or exploitation and neglect. And they're represented as a drain on society's resources. Contrary to our widows, widows are in our time who can inherit, who lead rich, full lives, don't have to remarry if they don't want to, are defined by who they are. They can, transform themselves into whoever they want to be. But in the biblical time, inheritance was based on blood relations to the husband's family. And so some Israelite law does make provision for the security of a widow. Now, here's the weird part, what I was talking about with once heir dies and Onan has supposed to go into him. So here is the Levitical law around that, and it's in Deuteronomy. When brothers reside together and one of them dies and has no son, the wife of the deceased shall not be married outside the family to a stranger. Her husband's brother shall go into her, taking her in marriage and performing the duty of a husband's brother to her. And the firstborn whom she bears shall succeed to the name of the deceased brother, so that his name may not be blotted out of Israel. Um, so it's a way of immortality, if you will, because the way that people are remembered in the Judaic tradition is through children. If and it goes on to say if he has no desire, then she has other recourses, but it is seen as if the brother refuses to marry her, she can go to the elders and say, he won't marry me, and she, if he's brought before the elders and says no, I have no desire to marry her, then so like in this case Tamar could go to Onan, and I love this. The wife shall go up to him in the presence of the elders and pull his sandal off his foot, spit in his face, and declare, this is what is done to the man who does not build up his brother's house. Throughout Israel, his family shall be known as the house of him whose sandal was pulled off. There's an insult for you. So it was a really bad thing that Onan did not fulfill this duty. Has anyone heard of the sin of onanism?
It sounds vaguely familiar, but I could not define it.
Okay. The sin of onanism is basically masturbating. It is spilling your seed for no purpose.
Oh, it's a waste. It's like a waste, because that's supposed to be for populating the planet.
So Onan basically, he goes in to do right, but he pulls out and spills his seed. Okay. And that's why God smites him.
Okay, I thought that's what that meant, but thanks for the further clarification.
The visual clarification, yes. So she's a pretty savvy person, because she's stuck in a bind. And the reason Onan didn't want to do this was, who knows whether he liked his brother or not. Doesn't matter. He didn't want to share his inheritance.
Oh.
Because remember, Er is the firstborn son, which means that Er's son, via Onan, would get the most of the inheritance. So he's greedy. So he gets smited.
What does smited mean? I mean, does he just get thrown out? Killed? Oh, he kills him. Oh, he's whacked. Okay.
God struck him down.
Oh, struck him. Oh, he's dead. He's a dead man. Okay.
He's dead man.
Okay.
Er was like a bad man in the sight of God, and he just got smited for whatever that meant. And Onan did wrong, so he got smited for that.
Okay.
But Shelah apparently, was too young and was spared all that. But Judah clearly blames Tamar for this problem, that he lost two of his sons, and doesn't want to give, like either is afraid of it, doesn't want to give, make Shelah do what he's supposed to do. So she's really, it's fascinating because she's forced to come up with a plan.
Yeah.
She would either end up being, a widow at her father's house for the rest of her life, with unable to get married, and unable then to have children. So it really sucks for her. She is known as a trickster, and she is one of the other, what's the word I'm looking for? She is one of those people who is able to change the course of events by taking action.
Okay.
She is not a passive person. She is an active person. She figures out something, it may not have worked. Fortunately, it worked, but she decided, I'm not going to just sit by. This is wrong. So, there's really no way to get Shelah, but there might be a way to get Judah. And he really is. It is sort of
Judah must have had a reputation of
oh,
having relations with prostitutes. I mean, she must have,
that was not an uncommon thing
Oh, that was a common practice. Okay.
Oh yeah.
And she had to time it just right.
Oh yeah.
So she was in tune with her body, shall we say.
Right. I mean, that I figured the Holy Spirit took care of that. But
that's listen to me. The science behind it. Wait a minute. One time, only one time.
All it takes is once.
That is true.
How many people are like, oh, it's only one time? Well,
that is true. That is true. But again,
many have lived to regret that sentence.
Yeah.
So anyway, so that's who Tamar is. And I think she brings a pretty
Hey, good for her. The girl's got to do what a girl's got to do, man.
Yeah, a girl's got to do what a girl's got to do. And then the next drawing that I have is sort of her. You can see that she's a little bit pregnant, and there's Judah, and she's got the ring, and she's got the cord, and so
she's got the goods.
It's kind of like, what are you gonna do? Burn me? So that's who Tamar is. I think she's really kind of a cool figure because she's not going to just sit back and let life happen to her. She has a keen sense of fairness. She is smart, and I have to say, as much as I may have a difficult time with Judah, he's one of the few men who in the Bible says, I was wrong. She was right. I was wrong. So I thought, a pretty neat person to share. Does anyone have any questions about her?
What happened to the kids? What happened to Perez, and what was the other kid's name?
Perez and Zela, they have children. They have.
So they go on. They're accepted into the family. It's not like they're considered.
Yes. Oh yes, yeah.
Children, or they have. Okay.
Yeah. So she's Perez becomes the father of Hezron, and then we go into a whole line.
So he accepts them as his kids, and.
Yep. Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Of them obviously financially as well. Okay. Yep. Interesting.
So. Yeah. So it's kind of cool. So good question. Any other questions?
I like her already.
Like I said, the women that are named,
what a girl's got to do.
Yeah, the women that are named in the genealogy, they all have. There's good reasons. Ruth is the one that I was missing. So it's Tamar.
Oh yeah.
Tamar and Ruth. I think the reason that David is the father of Solomon by the wife of Uriah. I think that's because David is the one who pursued her. Tamar was in a tough situation. Rahab was in a tough situation. Ruth was in a tough situation. Mary was put in a tough situation. But Bathsheba, she really, she was coveted and taken as opposed to the other women. And I think that's why she's not specifically named and was only named as the wife of Uriah, because Uriah was an upright guy who ends up getting murdered. So that's my theory on why. Who knows? I'm making that up. So it's just my.
Well, some of this isn't subject to interpretation.
Oh, that's right.
A lot of people would think what she did was awful. That she should have just stayed in her place. Yeah, I obviously.
Again, we go back to women, and then we have the fact that David was a king. Kings had harems, and they really didn't have.
Oh, that's true. See, some of this was the culture. Yeah.
Exactly. So.
Thank goodness times have changed.
Amen.
This does help you appreciate how far we.
If your husband dies, you don't have to marry his brother.
That's right. That's right. That's true.
Well, no, that's interesting because right away I thought about like the Kennedys again.
Oh, interesting.
Because you know how Bobby was always standing by Jackie, and
interesting.
You gotta
You know?
wonder what went on there, man. Yeah.
And I always kidded about how Chris was Mike's child, not Bob's. But now, because when he was first born, he looked like Mike. He looked so much like Mike.
Is Mike his brother?
Yeah,
Oh, okay. I just want to make sure I
I
was
should have said
understanding.
that. I should have said that. But when he was born, and my father-in-law looked at me and said, "You know what he looks like?" I said, "Yeah, well, at least I kept it in the family."
Yeah.
That's funny. That is funny.
Good for
And now he
you.
looks like Bob, so we're okay.
It's funny. I look at my son sometimes, and he's like a combination between the two uncles. Because my ex had a brother, and I've got a brother. And I sometimes look at Eric and think he's kind of a cross between Uncle Mike and Uncle Dennis. So and it's all the DNA is all there. I mean, it makes sense. So that's funny, Libby, you say that.
Genes
I
are
was
The
married
genes
to
are
an
there.
identical twin, and I never thought to use that. Like I could have, like during the divorce or something, just to mess with David.
that would
I never thought of that because who's to say
right,
they
right.
were identical? I mean,
Wow.
yeah.
Well, if there aren't any other questions, I will stop the recording.
Oh,
And
are you recording this? Oh, geez.
yeah, just the TV part. We're not gonna go.
Christine, you look lovely.
And don't worry, no one's gonna. So, but next week, and I'll post the lesson. Next week we will be looking at Rahab.
Oh, good.
Okay.
Cool.
It was. It's interesting because Tamar is listed as a widow because she was a widow first, and Rahab falls under the category of harlot. So
Ah,
Tamar
oh,
kind of crosses those two.
Wow.
So next week, Rahab. And